Well, I mean, you can use a variety of methodologies. I mean, in a liberal arts context, such as exists in many universities in the United States, you can be an anthropologist, you can be a historian, you can be a political scientist, a sociologist, a philosopher. The point is that you have to excel in what you're doing. Yeah, and I think that those of us who have to make a place for ourselves in a completely different environment from the one that we grew up in initially, you have to work extra hard. And if you're a woman, you have to work twice as hard. So I would say that there is a hierarchy. But regardless, I think with whatever discipline you choose, you have to excel in it in order to make a mark. And I think that that's the only way that immigrants can sort of move forward. The only thing I will add is that there is a tendency among some people to think that they can excel in everything. They can be best at this, they can be best at that. I tend to think that you should focus on one issue and excel in that. And after that, once you have excelled, you will have opportunities to try and excel in others. But if you try to do too much, the chances are that you may not end up excelling in anything. And then you just get frustrated and then you blame the context. But I do think that, at least in the United States, I think people do acknowledge quality. And when they see it, if they can, they accommodate you. But if you're not up to par, then I'm afraid that you will not be given the opportunities that I think immigrants expect and deserve. So hard work is very important, Martin.
Immigrants across the globe, welcome again to the Immigrant Nation, where we celebrate the stories of extraordinary immigrants shaping the world as immigrants. Today, we are honored to feature Dr. Ayesha Jalal, a trailblazing historian and the Mary Richardson Professor of History at Tufts University. Born in Lahore, Pakistan, Dr. Jalal has redefined South Asian history or historiography, if you want to put it that way, through works like The Sole Spokesman and The Struggle for Pakistan. A recipient of the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, she has dedicated her career to unraveling the complexities of Muslim identities, modern Islam, and the geopolitics of South Asia. Join us as we dive into her journey, insights and faith, politics and history, and her principles of success as an immigrant and academia in the United States. Dr. Aisha, how did your experience moving from Lahore in Pakistan to New York at a tender age of 14 shape your worldview and later influence your academic pursuits?
Well, first of all, I didn't move here as an immigrant. I was here with my family. My father was working for the Pakistan mission to the UN, so I was going to school in New York City. Then I returned to Pakistan, finished my high schooling, and then I applied to Wellesley College, where I got admitted. So I did my BA at Wellesley. And then I went to the UK to do my PhD. And then I got a job in the United States. And that's how I ended up sort of getting involved with the academy and stayed on. So it
Very
wasn't a
interesting.
planned immigration in the sense of moving for the first time. I didn't immigrate as such.
Okay. So obviously you have uh, transcended and traveled. You found yourself in Pakistan and you're in the US, then you're back to the UK and back to the US. That diverse experience allows you to see the world from a different perspective. At this point, when you are coming back to the US, this time specifically as an immigrant, um, how did you approach your day-to-day life?
Well, I mean, I was in an academy, in an academic setting, so I was primarily focused on my teaching and my students. And so, I mean, most of my papers, the required papers, were done by the university, so I didn't have to go through the normal procedures that many immigrants do now. And
Mhm.
of course, I got my immigration initially, my green card in the 80s. The situation was relatively easier then than it has become now. Things are much tougher. for immigrants trying to move in to the United States. But effectively, it was the university's setup that allowed me to get my green card, and then subsequently, eventually, after the green card, the next step is citizenship. But that was much later.
Very interesting. Um, so, looking at your body of works and thinking about how you may have grown up. You grew up in a home where your one of your parents was an ambassador to the U.S. How
Well,
did growing up in
he
that
was working. Yes. Well, I mean, he that was very brief. I mean, the 2 years that we spent in New York, because he was otherwise he was in the press information services, but he was in New York at a very difficult time in Pakistan's history, and he was taking care of the journalistic side of things then too, even though he was obviously on a diplomatic passport. So yes, I mean, I grew up in a home where it was commonplace to hear politics being discussed on the table. We weren't sent away as children, so we were pretty sort of well informed about things. And I suppose that played a role in the kind of questions I had as a teenager, and which eventually informed my doctoral work, which was why a Pakistan came about in 1947 that satisfied the interests of his main constituents so poorly. Because, as you are aware, there are, in fact, more Muslims that live outside Pakistan today than within. So, as a homeland for India's Muslims, it's a curious result considering that the majority of the Muslims in the subcontinent live in India and Bangladesh and not in Pakistan. So that was obviously my primary research question. I was fortunate that the British papers, the British official papers related to partition and decolonization had just become open. So I had access to sources, which is not very usual, because you have to go. I mean, these days we have to create archives for ourselves, but this was a particular a bonus for me, and I was able to look at these original sources, which informed my first book, The Sole Spokesman, Jinnah, the Muslim League, and the Demand for Pakistan.
I am so very excited that you went there. So let's jump into your first book. Um, Modern Pakistan is its identity is hidden in what the past Pakistan looked like. In your book, The Soul Spokesman, you reevaluated Jinnah's role in the creation of Pakistan. How do you think this interpretation has influenced modern Pakistani identity?
Well, I mean, Pakistan's official nationalism and narratives of that nationalism talk about the creation of Pakistan in very different ways than I do. I mean, mine is a non-official academician, scholarly approach, and what I found was that Mr. Jinnah was really not looking for a complete severance, that he wanted to use Pakistan as a means to negotiate a power sharing arrangement that would cover Muslims across the board in South Asia. It wasn't meant to be just a separate state. And so he was looking for a substantial power sharing arrangement after the British quit India. So that's what I was able to discover. It was also consistent with the work that had been done on provincial politics, notably the politics of Bengal and Punjab, the two main Muslim majority provinces. Most people who have looked at partition have either looked at it through the great men of history, whether Gandhi, Nehru, or Jinnah, or through the religious prism, i.e., that it was basically Muslims and Hindus couldn't get on, and therefore partition had to happen. So I think that by bringing in the provincial dimension, I was able to complicate the picture considerably, and it gave me a very different perspective on things. But that was also building on some historiography that had been done on Punjab and Bengal. But I think that conceptually, the absence of the regional dimension has been one of the major problems in official narratives of why India was partitioned in 1947.
So you've you've described yourself as an agent of social change. Um, how do you
I
balance your role as an academic historian with that of a public intellectual advocating for societal progress?
Well, I mean, the academics don't live in silos. They can choose to, but typically we sort of address issues that are of contemporary concern. But we do so not simply by being presentist, as seems to be the tendency these days, but we delve into history and throw light on the present by looking at how history informs the present. I mean, people have very curious views of history as something that happened in the past, but my methodology with history, and I think those of us who do history, is that we feel that there's a deep dialogue between the present and the past. So the questions that we ask are questions that are about the concerns that are predominant in the present. So that's how we remain engaged. Obviously, our work is more scholarly, but in the process of interacting with various media, we are able to try and disseminate our ideas at a more popular level. And so I think that remains an ongoing endeavor, that one tries to make oneself more accessible to people, because in the first instance I can say quite bluntly that my first few works were, I was writing for the academy because I wanted acceptance in the academy. But after a while, you start writing more consciously for a general audience because you want to engage with them. So I think that is the usual trajectory, that one first gains acceptance in the academy and then one tries to reach out. But I do think that my first book has had a resonance with people outside the academy. People are still reading it, so that just shows. I mean, it's going to be 40 years um, uh, next year since the publication of the book, and it's still being read. So I think that shows that there is engagement with people. I don't know whether I've
If
answered your question adequately.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. You did, and you went beyond. I was looking at some of your quotes, and something that I found was very interesting, based on my background and knowledge, is the fact that it seems that the religion of Islam has been hijacked by two perspectives. Please hear me out. The first perspective is the modern European or modern Western perspective, where they have a certain interpretation of what Islam should be and must be. The other perspective is that of those who believe in Islam but have taken a radical perspective of what Islam should be. What is your perspective on how Islam is perceived and practiced in the modern world, especially in the context of global terrorism and media narratives?
Well, I mean, my view is that Islam is thought about rather ahistorically. And I think the colonization of the Muslim world, and you mentioned the European attempt to define Islam from their perspective. I think there's a connection between the two strands you talked about, and one is that in the context of South Asia, British colonialism played a very key role in deciding what they thought was significant in Islam and what wasn't. And I think that those whom you are calling radical are the ones who've imbibed the colonial attitude of what Muslims should be completely. So there is a direct link between the colonial conceptions of Islam and those of the radical groups that you just mentioned. So they really are living out exactly what the colonized West, the colonial West, thought the Muslims were and what they were expected to be. So they literally are they are lived up to their perceptions. And those of us
This,
who disagree and have a more historical attitude are continuing to challenge. My new book, called Muslim Enlightened Thought in South Asia by Rutledge, is one such attempt. So we continue to provide alternative perspectives, but I see a very clear link between colonial conceptions of Islam and the manifestations of radical extremist Islam that you are referring to.
So, immigrants have a responsibility. Part of that responsibility is being able to define who we are, whatever we are, and being able to push our values and culture in society, and at the same time maintaining those for ourselves. As a historian and a scholar, how can Islam scholars and historians like yourself counter the hijacking of Islamic teachings by extremist groups?
Well, I've written several books on the subject. Self and Sovereignty was one, Muslim identity on Muslim identity. Then I followed it up with Partisans of Allah on jihad in South Asia. And then more recently, as I mentioned, a Muslim enlightened thought. How can we challenge it? Well, first of all, by making clear that we need to reconcile Muslim conceptions of revelation with history. It's to say that they are not sort of reconcilable is a problem, and I think that by locating Islam in history, we understand much more than if we simply look at either theology or jurisprudence, which a lot of people tend to do. The Orientalist view of, which is really the colonial view that we were talking about, the Orientalist view does tend to reduce Islam into either law or theology, whereas the history is conveniently left out. And as a result, the tendency is to blame Islam rather than Muslims, what Muslims have made of Islam. To blame the religion. And I think this is a pretty consistent tendency in a particular strand of Orientalist scholarship. There's some very good Orientalist scholarship as well, but this is one of the strands that tends to sort of locate the authoritative quote unquote Islam in theology and jurisprudence, and not in literature, philosophy, and a variety of other modes of expression, art, music. So I think those are also sort of aspects of Islam, and Muslims have played a very crucial role. So one needs to locate issues that we debate in history, and understand that Muslims have responded to them within a particular context, and the tendency to sort of take issues out of context and treat them as eternal, theoretical, abstract ideas just confuses people. So I think that's what I would say, that as historians, we try to take issues and locate them in history, and history is always subject to change. So perspectives on a specific issue can be very different in the 7th century from what they might be in the 21st. And I think we need to be aware of that.
You have a great body of work, which means it speaks a lot about the intensity and the perspective you've had on your work. And I'm just curious, for immigrants who are starting out, who are coming out of colleges, for example, that are looking to change their small perspective of the world. They're looking to make a correction somewhere. They're looking to write a book, do a body of art, as you describe it. What type of discipline is required? What skills are required for them to get to a place where they can produce work that is respected across the globe?
Well, you can use a variety of methodologies. In a liberal arts context, such as exists in many universities in the United States, you can be an anthropologist, you can be a historian, you can be a political scientist, a sociologist, a philosopher. The point is that you have to excel in what you're doing, and I think that those of us who have to make a place for ourselves in a completely different environment from the one that we grew up in initially, you have to work extra hard, and if you're a woman, you have to work twice as hard. So I would say that there is a hierarchy. But regardless, I think with whatever discipline you choose, you have to excel in it in order to make a mark. And I think that that's the only way that immigrants can sort of move forward. But the only thing I will add is that there is a tendency among some people to think that they can excel in everything. They can be best at this, they can be best at that. I tend to think that you should focus on one issue and excel in that. And after that, once you have excelled, you will have opportunities to try and excel in others. But if you try to do too much, the chances are that you may not end up excelling in anything. And then you just get frustrated and then you blame the context. But I do think that, at least in the United States, I think people do acknowledge quality. And when they see it, if they can, they accommodate you. But if you're not up to par, then I'm afraid that you will not be given the opportunities that I think immigrants expect and deserve. So hard work is very important, Martin.
Yes, I completely agree. Hard work is important, and dedication to what you do, focusing really on what you want to do to become a legacy for you. You've you've had a lot of experience when it comes to Israel and Russia. In shaping contemporary politics in Pakistan, what implications does this have for the region's stability?
Can you just? I just missed the earlier. You named two things: Israel and
And Russia.
Russia. Why Russia and Israel? I'm a bit sort of curious what you're driving at.
Okay, so I'm actually gonna get to that. The reason why Russia and Israel come up is because there is indirect participation of Pakistan as a state in involving itself as a third party between the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, while at the same time
Oh,
in the
I see.
current.
You're referring to that. But I think that particular conflict was purely coincidental, with the then Prime Minister finding himself on the wrong foot in Moscow at the wrong time. And I mean, I don't detect any. I mean, it is true that with the changes and shifts in U.S. relations with Pakistan, which were pretty much based on the US presence in Afghanistan and then the need to get out of it. Pakistan has obviously been stretching the net because America's interests are now squarely with India in their attempts to offset China and China's rise. And Pakistan, as you know, has had a long standing relationship with China. So, in that context, Pakistan's efforts to reach out to Russia for its own purposes are entirely sort of understandable. But I don't see, I think too much has been made of the former Prime Minister's presence in Moscow the day that Russia invaded Ukraine. It did not signify any sort of commitment by the Pakistan government or the Pakistan army, which is the key institution here, in that war. I think Pakistan has been a little bit more neutral, quote unquote, if that's possible, than complicit on Russia's side. That doesn't mean that Pakistan is not looking for cheaper oil sources from Russia or anything else that they can take from Russia, which would be beneficial to them. As for Israel, Pakistan's policy towards Israel is rather a non starter, I would have thought, given the fact that they don't recognize Israel. And if you look at the sum total of Muslim states and their lack of effectiveness, I think Pakistan is one of them. They've been able to not do nothing. I mean, with American support for Israel, I think the Muslim countries have simply not been able to get their act together. I understand they're trying to get together now to do something, but the worst has happened and has been happening, and they've been completely ineffectual. So I would say that while Pakistan officially sides with the Muslim world, broadly speaking, um, it has no relationship per se with Israel to play a role, effective or in any effective manner, in the interests of the Palestinian people.
Do you believe or think that the US foreign policy at the moment is impacting Pakistan and in the broader Muslim world altogether?
Well, yes. I mean, the U.S. I mean, without the U.S. support, I don't think Israel would be where it is. Over a year of a devastating war that's leading to hunger and famine-like conditions in Gaza. So I do think that the U.S. is very much sort of complicit in all of this, and that does impact. I mean, as far as Pakistan is concerned, there have been moments of deep-seated antagonism towards the United States, which have had an impact on diplomatic relations. And currently, from Pakistan's own perspective, it's the US tilt, undiluted, unbridled tilt towards India, because India is the larger market. India is a country that the United States has been trying to woo since 1947. Was not very successful, but now things have changed, and so Pakistan is not unaware of the standing of India in US estimation, largely because of their anti China policy. So Pakistan is opening up to other countries like Russia and China. So I would see it in that context. I mean, China was always there, but Russia was not. And I think Russia is now where Pakistan is trying to also take corrective measures where it sees that it was a neglect, that they ought to have kept Russia, at least kept the dialogue going with them.
Do you see the interplay between religions and statecraft in Pakistan political history?
Well, I think that it's been a very divisive relationship, because what ought to have been, I mean, religion was the one factor that provided a sort of glue to Muslims who were divided by language, region, class, occupation. Unfortunately, the use by the state, by the post-colonial state of Pakistan, of religion as a means to deny provinces their diversity, their share of political and economic power, has turned religion, sadly, into a divisive rather than a unifying factor. So I think that the uses made of religion have been negative rather than positive. It did not prevent, as you know, the brutal repression and subsequent separation of Bangladesh in 1971, despite the Muslim bond. So I do think that we need to keep in mind that religion, while it's a matter of faith, is not devoid of regional aspirations as well. I mean, there are Bengali Muslims who have more in common with Bengali Hindus than they do with Punjabi Muslims. So region does impact your religion as well. Religion is, it doesn't sort of, religion is there, but you're also something else. One has multiple identities.
I completely agree. So, talking about multiple identities, um, being married to a historian, Sugata Boss,
I
how
please do.
has
I
your,
don't want to say. I would prefer not to. I think this is not something I want to talk about at all. So
of
I
course,
think that I told you that I want to keep it professional, so I would take this out.
being a champion of women's issues, critics know limited focus or figures like Fatma Jina in your work. What challenges do you think women face in reclaiming their narrative in Southern Asian politics?
Enormously, because they're not even acknowledged. I mean, the writing out of women in history has been a very consistent uh, uh, process over the long term. It's not that women have not been making their impact on history, it's just that their contributions don't get recorded. What gets recorded are the heroic actions of men. I mean, those are the things that history records, rather than the often determined yet passive resistance that women have shown in everyday life to injustice, to structures of coercion. So I think that those don't get recorded, and as a historian, I can say that it becomes very difficult to retrieve women in history. You can do that as a fiction writer, As an anthropologist, you can concentrate on women who are alive and well today, but as a historian, you can't put words into the mouth of somebody who's dead, unless you're writing literature. So, methodologically, the absence of women in history, in South Asian history, is a huge problem. It is true that there are various ways of now trying to, uh, you know, change the balance, and some of my students are now working on it. But it has been a long-standing problem that very little is available for us to construct a definitive history, even of Fatima Jinnah. I mean, there's more about what people think of her than there is actual documentation that one can use and assess and come to a very conclusive perception of what she was all about. I mean, there are works that are being done, but I think the lack of material is something that continues to undermine our efforts to retrieve women in history in South Asia, whether it's Hindu, Muslim, or Sikh, or any other religion. So I do think that that's not just a Muslim problem, it's a problem across the board.
Talking about lack of material, as a professor, how are you inspiring your students to approach history, especially when you think critically and engage with complex narratives?
Well, in my time, I mean, I was primarily looking at colonial sources, certainly for my first work. But now I think that the requirements of history have changed. I mean, in my time, oral history was not looked as a serious way of doing history. I mean, that's completely been changed. So you can do oral history, you can now use ethnography, which is what anthropologists do. Historians do ethnography. But they also have a deeper sort of engagement with the past. And now I would say that I encourage my students to have projects that enable them to engage with colonial sources, certainly 19th and 20th century, but also to supplement those sources with a variety of other kinds of sources, such as visuals, such as movies, such as oral histories. So I think that there is a lot more room now. There was a time when unless it was in the official archives of a country, it was not deemed to be sort of solid enough. But I think now the attitude is that you do both. You do colonial sources and you do unofficial sources, which are equally salient depending on the question that you're asking.
Immigrant Tribe, we celebrate the stories of extraordinary immigrants shaping the world as immigrants. In today's show, we are honored to feature Dr. Ayesha Jalal, a trailblazing historian and the Mary Richardson Professor of History at Tufts University. Born in Lahore, Pakistan, Dr. Jalal has redefined South Asian historiography through works like The Sole Spokesman and The Struggle for Pakistan. A recipient of the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, she has dedicated her career to unraveling the complexities of Muslim identities, modern Islam, and the geopolitics of South Asia. What really drives you or motivates you to write, and especially what drove you to writing The Struggle for Pakistan, and how do you want readers to rethink Pakistan's past and their future?
Thank you. Well, I mean, as I said to you earlier, I end up doing projects based on questions I have in the present, i.e., the questions that are bothering me. The Sole Spokesman was definitely a product of my disaffection with the then military ruler, General Ziaul Haq, who used to say that Pakistan was only created in the name of religion, which is therefore what he was trying to do, Islamize Pakistan according to his preferred vision of Islam. So I wanted to know whether that was indeed the case, which is why I studied partition of India, why Pakistan was created, and I found my answers. And then I've written other books with similar sorts of questions. The Struggle for Pakistan is the only book I've written on someone else's request. I was commissioned to write this book because there was a need for it, and I agreed to do it because I felt that at that time when I was writing this, this is. I mean, the Americans were in Afghanistan. Pakistan was a difficult ally, and I think it was important. And I mean, you were getting a lot of sort of stuff on Pakistan that was patchwork quilt, and I wanted to do a narrative history connecting 1947 to the present so that you could take the longer view. Um, Rather than just the view of Pakistan as a cauldron of terror. Or because that's what was being projected when I wrote this. So I wrote this, the struggle for Pakistan, to contest three dominant views at that stage that were being paraded. One was that Pakistan was a mistake, i.e., should not have been created in 1947. Second, that Pakistan was doomed to have a bloody existence, which it was at that stage. There was bloodshed and a lot of internal trouble. And thirdly, that Pakistan was insignificant and that didn't need to be taken seriously at all. So I thought that those three sets of perceptions needed to be challenged. And that's what I tried to do in the struggle for Pakistan, which, as I said, was commissioned by Harvard University Press.
We you're in a position where you're shaping minds and challenging minds at the same time. How have figures like Sadat Hassan Manto and Faiz Ahmed Faiz influenced your understanding of South Asia cultural identity, and what is the role of immigrants when it comes to setting their own cultural identities?
Well, I mean, I think that Manto is my great grand uncle. So I grew up in a household where he was a larger than life. I mean, his status was larger than life. I never met him. And I wrote a book on him called The Pity of Partition. Fez, Ahmed Fez. I mean, so they both clearly have. I mean, the reason I wrote The Soul Spokesman was because I had read Manto's short stories and wanted to know whether these stories were corroborated by history. I mean, I never sort of thought that I could write short stories like he did, but I still wanted to know whether there was evidence in history for what he wrote about. So clearly he influenced me. Faiz Ahmed Faiz is one of the most sort of delightful poets of a particular progressive bent, who's clearly influenced me a great deal. And I enjoy his poetry, his life. I've written about him when the occasion has occurred. I think immigrants should delve into their own history and culture, and find expression and give it expression, because it's not as if uh, everything was discovered in what we call, I mean I call it the so-called West because it's a construct. Not everything was discovered there. I think every culture has something to offer, and I think it's important that we relate to that and share it with people as well. I think that can be the immigrant contribution, so that we understand that the world is diverse and it was meant to be diverse. It's not that we want a homogeneous world where everybody thinks the same thing. So I think every immigrant should put forward their own perspectives based on their own cultural traditions, and share it with others. And I think it should be possible. I don't believe that there is only one way to be things. I mean, that's basically what's been wrong with history, where there's been a perception that the rest of the world is catching up with the so-called West. We're constantly catching up. And if you haven't gone through a certain process, you're not sort of somehow modern. So I think those are just constructions that need to be exposed for what they are. They are just they're make beliefs, and for convenience purposes. So I think we all need to basically take control of ourselves, and we can do that best by coming to terms with our own histories and the formation of ourselves through historical processes. We need to recognize that. Once you recognize that, you can begin to contribute to the rest of the world, either based on your own cultural tradition or in engagement with another cultural tradition. But I think one must be confident about oneself in order to be able to share something worthwhile and make a difference.
The ability of anybody being able to um, share something worthwhile, to me, also reflects the ability to be able to overcome difficulty. And so, with that said, there are certain lessons we learn throughout life, some good and some not necessary. What lessons have you learned as an immigrant? From, say, for example, your tenure at Columbia, and how did that experience shape your career?
Well, I had 3 books and I was denied tenure, so I fought back. And I think I haven't really looked back at Columbia since then. I think I've just continued to move forward and continue to produce. So I think that the biggest sort of problem that immigrants will face, all immigrants will face, is that in a new environment, unless you're some sort of a rocket scientist, you're not going to get a reception. You'll have to prove yourself. You'll have to work hard. You will also find people who are not well disposed to you because you look different. So you have to sort of deal with all those factors because they're real, they're not imagined. And so you have to sort of, this is what I was suggesting, that you have to work extremely hard to neutralize the biases and prejudices with which an immigrant, a newly a new immigrant is met in a society which forgets that it is an immigrant society, but which likes to forget that. And I find that very amusing about America after having read American history and having read endlessly about how this consists of immigrants to be now in a context where immigrants are deplored and are deemed to be unwanted. So I think that the only way that that can change is by immigrants making themselves useful and contributing to the society that they live in, rather than living in silos of their own. I think that is the way in which the anti-immigrant narrative that has been fed over the last sort of 8 or 7 and 8 9 years, really 10 years, I would say, because it wasn't as strong earlier. It has been a product of a certain kind of politics. And I think that there are various ways of dealing with it, but I think one way is to get more involved in the society that we have adopted as our own and work for it.
Getting involved in the society that we have adopted in our home means sometimes we have to get involved in understanding what the functioning of our local communities. At the same time, that means we need to also understand politics. What's the role of the immigrant
Well, I think
in?
the immigrant to understand American politics. I mean, if you are talking about the immigrant in this society, you need to understand how U.S. politics works. Unfortunately, the immigrants who are of relatively new standing tend to sort of be foregrounding their own community interests. What I'm trying to say is that communities will be better received and looked upon if they contribute to the larger community as well. That comes later, but I do think that it would help to make yourself much more relevant to the broader American community rather than just your own community. And I think immigrants need to do that. It's not easy. It takes time. But I do think that that will be necessary. And I think if you look at the history of migrant communities, that is exactly what has happened in American history, that initially they may have a focus on their own community, but as time goes on, they've got more and more engaged, and the acceptability of their own community has also increased. I've seen this in the UK as well. The South Asian community, unlike in the US, where it is highly educated and professional, in the UK, it really was a large number were unskilled laborers, and so their status in society was not very sort of high. They were looked down upon. But over the years, the South Asians have become more integrated in a way. And some of the Eastern Europeans are being meted out that same treatment that South Asians used to get because they are relatively newcomers. So time does make a difference, I think. We
Yes.
need to understand that things are not going to happen right away. They'll happen over a period of time. But you do need to contribute consciously to the society where you have decided to live rather than just your own. I mean, you can't live in the US and just focus on your own community or sub
That,
community, as it were.
that's right. So, talking about communities and our influence in our local communities, obviously, um, we you refer to where we it takes time and for us to that what is that time when there's that time period that you building yourself, you're getting to understand the politics of the community you moved in, you're getting to understand how the community function, and you're participating, you're learning. And so I want to reference back to what's behind you. What's the power of books which you've written? What's the power of books that you've read? And how has that empowered you to become not just an informed immigrant, but a participating citizen who inspires change?
Well, I hope that I inspire change. I don't know if I do. I suppose I have an expertise in South Asia, which is useful for this country in certain, I mean, in trying to understand what's going on. South Asia is a complex society with multiple layers of cultural influence, many different kinds of nation states. By sort of working on South Asia, I have something to contribute. Um, but that can only come through a lot of hard work. I mean, they are. I mean, they're doctors, they're engineers, they're scientists from South Asia in America. They're immigrants, and they're making their contributions in their own lines. So I think that's how one can make a contribution. But you do need to bring something. I mean, if you don't have those skills and knowledge, then you will struggle. I mean, you can. I mean, there are many ways of being an immigrant. I mean, I'm an academic, and I'm engaged with a university. But people can sort of do different sorts of things. There are people who contribute to issues of social injustice that they see. They play a role there. So there are a variety of ways. But I think learning how to give to the society that you belong should be a part of the immigrant experience, a very conscious one.
Have you this sounds rhetorical, but have you figured how to approach balancing academic rigor with making your work accessible to a broader audience?
It's a struggle. It's always a struggle. I think that it is possible to write accessibly and remain true to the rigors of research. And you write. You can't write for an audience that doesn't want any challenge at all. But I think that I write for an intelligent audience who do want a little bit of challenge. And I do think that writing accessibly, something that academics didn't do, and perhaps I didn't do as much when I was writing for the academy. You write more consciously. You know that you are trying to express yourself and you're trying to convey ideas. And the notion is to do so in a clear way. I mean, that's what I teach my students, how to write clear papers. So I think teaching also helps you a great deal in your ability to express yourself. Because if you can't make yourself explicable to your own students, then clearly you're doing something quite wrong, and students force you into sort of into a level of clarity that remove being removed from teaching makes more difficult.
Professor
Uh,
Aisha, one final question for you before we get off board. How are you leading your students in a way that they can understand the social changes that are happening in the globe today, and so that they can become future influencers that understand the global village?
Well, I think one thing that they all need to know is that many of our presumption. I mean, one of the things that I foreground is the fact that you know, half the problem of the world is because of the way we are perceiving it. And we do need to update our analytical apparatus when we are dealing with issues in the world. And so, if you already have your mind made up, then you are really going into studying something with a view to confirm your mind. But if you go with an open mind, education is about making students question what they are studying. I mean, as I always tell them, I can't tell them what to think, but I can tell them how to think. So I think that by making people aware that some of the presumptions that we have about other people or other places may be at fault in our perceptions is my first task. So I think that the most important thing is to get students to question categories, question ideas that they've always thought. I mean, religion, for instance. I mean, people talk about religion with the capital R, with little idea what they really mean. So, by making people conscious of how they use their ideas or words, I do think that enables students to, I mean, it opens up uh, 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 areas where otherwise they find themselves very limited or cornered. So I think I conceptually, I mean, I believe in conceptual history, and I challenge my students to critique the concepts that they have inherited and update them. So I think that's one way of trying to open up their minds to change, and the importance of thinking along, so that we contribute to change as well, not just be.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, those who have been in the last 50 minutes of our conversation and would like to get a hold of you to exchange ideas, what is the best way for them to be able to get a hold of you?
Well, I'm available on email. I mean, it's available online. I'm at Tufts University, and that shouldn't be too hard to find me.
Excellent. Thank you. We celebrate here at the Immigrant Podcast stories of extraordinary immigrants shaping the world as immigrants. Today, we have been honored to feature Dr. Ayesha Jalal, a trailblazing historian, and Mary Richardson, professor of history at Tufts University. Born in Lahore, Pakistan, Dr. Jalal has redefined South Asian historiography through works like The Soul Spokesman and The Struggle for Pakistan. A recipient of the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, she has dedicated her career to unraveling the complexities of Muslim identities, modern Islam, and the geopolitics of South Asia. Professor Aisha, we are so very glad you made the time for us
Thank you
this
so much.
morning.
Very
And,
kind of you.
and I
Very kind
want
of
to thank you so much. And hopefully, one of these fine days, we can support you in your endeavors. Please let my team know if you have anything that is going on. A new book, we would love to share your work with our listeners. And thank you for making the
you.
time
Thank you
for
so
us.
much. All the best. Bye bye.
Thank you.